Welcome to the Road to 100 Million in Real Estate podcast, where you'll benefit from the opportunity to learn to become a skillful real estate investor. You'll get guidance from top industry producers, operators, and investors who are eager to help you learn from their proven strategies of success. Now to your host, Dorrance Constant.
Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of the Road to $100 Million podcast. I'm your host, as always, Dorrance Constant. Super excited to have you today and have an incredible guest on the show. We have Bethany Finch. Bethany, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dorrance, thanks so much for having me. I'm sure excited to be here.
Awesome, for sure. Well, Bethany, I want to give folks a little heads up about you and your history professionally. So, folks, Bethany Finch is the remote RV investor and founder of American Made Home Solution. Bethany has had over 25 years founding and running 4 separate companies, a credit hacking business, an executive rental business, a single-family residential renovation business, and a multi-family syndication business. Bethany uses her God-given gifts to further Christ's kingdom while utilizing their many properties in many different markets. She loves to see the light bulb to go off for people to be able to see the door opened to opportunities they never knew were available. Awesome, Bethany. What does that mean to you? See the light bulb.
I think a lot of times we become so programmed by society. Like we go to school and the whole time in school, we're being trained how to be a good student, to go get a job, to go do what society wants us to do and what they think we should be doing. And so anytime somebody connects with their true self and they realize, wait a minute, I am better at this, and it doesn't look like what everybody else thinks I should. And that light bulb goes off like, wait, I can do this. That's a possibility. And they can become their true self and what God designed them to be. It's absolutely amazing when someone can walk in that purpose and know, wait, I was designed to be an entrepreneur and I need to go start a business and I need to create something and I need to do something different. And when they start walking in that, how much more joy they have, and not just purpose, but passion for life they have, and what a difference it makes.
That's awesome, Bethany. I know in your background, you were a teacher. Did that light bulb moment come from you as well when you were working as a teacher, or?
Absolutely. So everything I did really led up to my teaching experience. And so I oftentimes taught the high level maths, calculus, pre-calculus, algebra, physics, chemistry, biology, all the things that a lot of people they claim they don't get. So I loved hearing students say, I'm told I'm dumb and I don't get math, so help me pass this class. That's all I care about. And then they come back to me years later. Yes, Mrs. Finch, I still use my algebra every day. Or yes, I still use geometry. And when I saw that click that I'm not stupid, I can learn, and it's highly possible, it was like the icing on the cake for sure, because I knew they would succeed at that moment. Whatever else life threw at them, they no longer were conditioned to be what society told them to be, that they were dumb or they couldn't learn or they weren't smart enough or whatever.
That's super inspiring, Bethany, and especially that you were able to, be able to pull that out of folks. Because, you're right. Oftentimes we're so programmed to be the way in which society wants us to be that we can even lose sight or even not of the creativeness, the ability to really expand who we are to our fullest self, to provide the value that we truly are brought on this earth to provide that value, instead of just being, let's say, a cog in a wheel, right? So that's right. Awesome that you see that. And I'd love to hear, Bethany, I'm sure the audience would, is more about you and your story.
Well, so I definitely was wired to be an entrepreneur from the time I was little, but some of that I think was developed not because I had stupid teachers, but I had teachers early on that quickly labeled me as a troublemaker because I was smarter than the average kid in class. So I would get in trouble because I was bored. So the teachers that latched on and figured out, there's something up with this one, quickly figured out a different way to utilize that. So I became an entrepreneur by the time I was 10 years old. I had already started making money on my own. I was paying my own rent by 7th grade, doing all kinds of things. And some of that was society driven in my home life, but some of it was also just, it kept me out of trouble. So teachers were smart in doing so. When college was a means to an end, right? You're supposed to go to college to get a good job. So in my mind, I got a business degree because that was like the widest thing you could do. So it could work anywhere. And I quickly went into accounting and business in the business world and thought, this is for the birds. I don't want to do this. This is dumb. I worked in their corporate America for about less than 5 years and said, nope, I'm out. I was not a cubicle kind of girl and it didn't fit for me, and quickly stepped into business and started my own business then. And just kind of kept evolving and building different businesses to suit my family's needs, whether it was income, whether it was flexibility. At one point, I even ran one of my businesses at a loss to offset my husband's income for tax purposes. So there's different strategies. And once I realized it's just a matter of fine tuning the thing that works best for your family, and it doesn't have to look like everybody else, I just ran with it. And so I've always had businesses going. Even when I was working full-time as a teacher, I've always had businesses going. So my real estate investing, I was always looking for a way to create passive income. I recognized the job factor and didn't want to be trading time for money. So when we started down that path with real estate, I realized, okay, I could do this. I just might need to learn a few things, got the coaching, got the tools, got the training I needed, and dove in head first. In doing so, took off very, very quickly. Learned lots of mistakes that I try to help others not repeat, and then continued to go and grow from there, so that now we have the multifamily syndication. At one point, my husband had over 5,000 doors, all assets under management, all under full-blown renovations, an entire huge portfolio. And so we've gone full circle. He's gone from building and as a groundskeeper. He started as a groundskeeper and has worked his way all the way up as owner. I have always been on the business side of it. So all the contracts, the HR, the people, the budgets, the scheduling, all of that side of things. And so I reminded him when he came to work for us, we don't have billions of dollars in our budget. Stop blowing it. That's my profit you're spending.
Right.
So that's where we're at. Now we do the build to rent, which is, again, always looking at what the market needs and how to meet that need. So we are always focused on workforce housing. Workforce housing is not affordable housing, what that median income provides and what they can afford. So it's a very specific niche, but that's what got hurt the most in COVID. So we worked very closely with several of the markets we were already in and said, look, if we come to you with this, would you hear us out? And they said, absolutely. And now we have cities coming to us because the product that we're developing and how we're setting it up and how it's meeting that need and quickly, they're super excited about. So it's exciting to see that take off and running. And we're hoping to have 10,000 doors in the next 2 years.
That's awesome. And you touched on a topic that's really been kind of a buzzword as of late, right? Build to rent. That's been thrown around a lot. And this is something which a lot of folks don't necessarily have the understanding of. So I'd love to hear you talk about what build to rent is and what the purpose is. What's the gap that you're filling in the market?
So build to rent is where you're building a different product. So in a multifamily situation, you generally are building a very large, say 100-unit building or 6 or 7 buildings that have 100 doors in it. You have to wait for that entire building to be finished before you can get your certificate of occupancy. So you're waiting and waiting before you can get anybody in there. On build to rent, we're building single family homes. Some of them may be duplexes or fourplexes, but it's a single family home community. So the moment one house is done, I can get that certificate of occupancy immediately and place a tenant. So it's a much faster process. It follows residential code, again, not multifamily code. So because of that, again, it's a much quicker, streamlined process. There are a few nuances that we've had to get approved through the codes, but it allows it to be much quicker, more streamlined, less learning for the building inspectors and things, as well as contractor-wise. You can put contractors in and off, and so it streamlines your scheduling processes. So every part about it is much more efficient, but it also, again, we're still meeting that need. We're still getting 100 doors out there. And COVID taught everybody they don't want to be locked up in their apartment with all their kids and everybody trying to be on Zoom calls. So they want houses. They want a little bit of space. We're putting in yards and things for them. They'll have community amenities like pools, walking trails, dog parks, things like that. So they get all the best of both worlds. And this younger generation prefers to rent. They're not necessarily keen on buying and purchasing a home. So it gives them the opportunity to have that and not have to worry about all the fuss and maintenance.
Gotcha. So this is essentially truly a development project, right? Where you folks are building from the ground up. But instead, it sounds like instead of having to wait for an entire apartment community, let's say multifamily community from being built, you can jump right in. I mean, folks are able to move right in as soon as a property, a home is completely built out. That's super interesting. So I can see a lot of value, right? So what are some, I'm sure our folks want to know, what are some of the risks with, these types of projects?
Yeah. So, and that's the biggest thing that people don't know, right? You've seen developments where somewhere they along the way they got started and then they just died and nothing happened and they don't know. So then they just rule all development as risky. Every investment has risk. So the where the risk gets involved with development is if you purchase the land and
Mm,
you have no conversation with that local government, city, county, whatever that is, and they determine they're not going to let you do that project. Well, now your project is dead in the water. So now you got to find another use for that land. That's a risk. So that's part of the what's called entitlement process. If you go through the entitlement process, you're submitting your plans and your ideas to the local government. And then at that time, there you have to present it to the public. The public has to have a time to where they can voice their opinions and all of that. And at any point, that is all at risk. If the public says no, if this and this happens, or the city comes back and says, no, you got to do this, and it's no longer it's become cost prohibitive, then it could be dead in the water. So until you get that entitlement phase done, there's a lot of risk. But once that entitlement phase is done, now the city or local government says, yes, this project is a go. They may change some of the design parts of it, but the project is still a go. You can still do it. We don't have a problem with it. The public is on board with it. Everybody is good to go. So at that point, if you're coming in before that entitlement risk or before that entitlement is done, you have a little bit more risk. But then once that entitlement is done, now that risk is completely mitigated, then it's just dependent on that operator. How good of an operator? How much experience do they have? Are they getting projects done? Are they staying on timeline? Are they staying on schedule and budget, right? Or are they just blowing the budget? That's another risk that happens with development. Sometimes developers don't see the bigger picture. They only see their little small piece of the pie. And they don't care if they go over budget. They just assume that the rest of the team is going to pay for it. And well, it's the cost of doing business. It doesn't work like that because they don't see that big picture. So our development team is actually a part of our entire GP team. So we
mm.
have our developer, we have our finance, I'm community relations and investor relations. We have all of us, and we all have 25 plus years experience each. So that experience, we've been down there. We've seen, we've fallen down on our faces. We've had to get back up. We've gotten burned a few times. And that again eliminates a lot of that risk because now we're constantly watching that budget. We're watching these timelines. What about this? And what about this? And we can kind of predict what's coming because we've already gone full cycle on so many other projects. We can anticipate that. So once again, the risk comes to the entitlement. Once the entitlement phase is done, that risk is mitigated. Then it's on the operator and that whole part of the process and your funding, if you've got your funding lined up. So one of the things that we've seen recently, those rates went through the roof this
Hmm.
last year, right?
Right.
Just unbelievable. Smart, experienced operators like we are got a rate cap, paid the extra money, which at the time we were not happy about at
Hmm.
all. But again, we've been through up and down markets. Market cycles 10 to 12 years. We've already been through these. We know. So we got a rate cap. So are
Yeah.
we sweating it when everybody else is pulling up ship and selling out? No, we got a rate cap. We put reserves in there. We put contingencies in there. We already planned on that because we have experience and we know how to hedge our risks.
Right. So you mentioned a few things that are super important, right? Number one, the main risk is factor when beginning is essentially getting all the approvals from the county, right? And so are investors participating in that risk in the beginning, or is that something where your folks are putting the money up? Help us understand what that looks
So
like.
two ways. So the very first project we ever did, we did 100% of that all on our own. We had no investor monies at risk there. It was just our team's money at risk. And then once we got far enough into the project where we're going into the horizontal, we've got the bank loan, then we brought investor monies in. On projects 2 and 3, we looked at it and said, there's other investors who know us, who have been with us, they've seen us, they're comfortable with us, they may be willing to participate in that risk with us, and we're willing to reward them. So if they come in during that entitlement phase, we pay them a premium for that. Mm-hmm. And then those that come in later in the process don't get that premium. So each part of it, when the risk is mitigated or not mitigated, they have different investment incentives, I would say, is probably the best part. So earlier you come in, the higher the rate of the return, a little bit more risk, but you get that return. The later you come in, the less risk, but you don't get as good a return as the earlier ones.
Gotcha. And you mentioned something that was super important, right? When you're working with developers, you bring them on as a GP, essentially I imagine, to ensure that there's a lot of incentives aligned. So I'd love to hear you talk about that a bit more so that our folks who are listening could maybe be looking for that when they're working with development investment projects.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that you hear probably the most complained about is, well, I hired a developer. Did you hear the word hired? They weren't a teammate, right? There's no incentive there. It's a job to them. So once they get paid, they're out, they're done. But if they're part of a team and their incentive is to see the project all the way through, that's a different scenario. So we always are a team. We have subs that we hire, like my streets guys, they're not part of my GP team, but my overall developer is. So if the project doesn't come to fruition, he's not getting paid. There's stepping stones and benchmarks that have to be met all along the way. You don't just, so many times I hear, well, the developer wanted half down, and so I gave it to him, and then he never showed up to do any of the work. And then they just lost all their money. And now they're bankrupt, basically, and the project is a no-go. We've never done that because, again, it's got to be a team effort. So there should be benchmarks. You get paid when work is completed. There is no upfront money. End of story. How much money does it cost to clear trees off of a land? Right? Go clear the trees off the land. Send me the bill. I'll pay you. Right? You're not paying those guys ahead of time. So why would I pay you ahead of time? I wouldn't. But a lot of people get sucked into, and they're like, oh, well, that's just the way he operates. Then don't use him. That's the whole point, right? We need to have benchmarks, and all along the way, people need to get paid, right? A workman is worthy of his hire. So he needs to get paid, but he also needs to have accountability. So if I don't see pictures, they can submit an invoice all they want. If I don't see my pictures, if I don't see my videos, if I don't have an inspector sign off, different things like this, those accountability measures aren't met, they're not getting a check. It ain't happening.
Absolutely. And if you would, you mentioned rate cap, and I'm sure there's folks in our who are listening don't understand what a rate cap is, and really the importance of it in a market like this. So I'd love for you to talk about that as well.
Yeah. So when we were getting our loans for our infrastructure on one of our projects, it was before all the inflation rate hikes. But again, remember, our finance team has 25 years experience. That's 2 market cycles plus. So they'd already seen rates kind of come up and go and see what can happen. And we've also been in the development phase 25 plus years. So we knew the risks. So the products that were being offered to us lending wise were adjustable rates. So if you can't get a fixed rate on a construction loan and it has to be an adjustable, if you can get a fixed rate, that's a different story. But things were starting to dry up. That was a little bit harder. So how do we get the deal done? So you go with the adjustable rate, but here's the thing. If they're allowed, they say, oh, we're only going to go up X amount, say 1 point or 2 points. That could sink your deal. Mm-hmm. So in our situation, when we do all of our underwriting, we underwrite it at where it's at, and then we underwrite it at the max. So when we looked at their max, it would have sank our deal. We would have gone into foreclosure. So we said, okay, what's it going to cost us to do a rate cap? And a rate cap is where you say, we don't let you, the lender, raise our rate above a certain amount, but we're willing to pay money up front for that. So it kind of safeguards us and them. It was very expensive. We're talking like $300,000. It wasn't cheap. And so, but it allowed us so that when we saw jumps every single week of 1 point. It was crazy. So when we saw that, we were incredibly thankful that everybody listened and we all agreed, spend the money, spend the money, spend the money, because now a lot of our other investors that have started down that path, they're closing up shop and they're foreclosing because the rates are too high and they can't wait it out. for it to come back down. It'll come down, but they don't have the time to wait on it. They've already got investor money flowing. They didn't stagger things like we do, things like that.
Right, right. Super important that you did that, right? And it's a testament to the experience that you folks had. Being with 25 years, that means you've been through several of the downturns that we've had. So you were able to anticipate the potential of this happening and protect yourself, right? On both
Yes.
the high end and low end. So that's super, super important. I'd love to hear more about some of the strategies you folks have when you're actually going out there and choosing a build to rent site and how that fits into your long-term vision.
Sure. So have you heard of Starbucks?
Yes, I have.
What about McDonald's?
I've heard of them a couple times.
Walmart?
Yes, for sure.
Home Depot?
Yeah. I think they sell home goods, right?
That's right. They all have extensive marketing research departments. So they are already looking at areas that they want to grow in. Their businesses are not in it, they are growing businesses. So they're always looking at new markets and where and when and how soon and all of that. So if there's Starbucks, Walmart, Home Depot's coming to those markets, would you say that's a growing market or a dying market?
I would say that is a great indicator of a growing market.
Yes, very much so. So when you look at everywhere that growth is going, we don't want to grow where the growth is at. We want to go where the growth is going because our projects are taking, 5 years. So, and a market cycle is 5 to 10 years. So we need to purchase the land when it's in that down cycle so that in 5 years, when we want to potentially sell it or refinance it, we're back in that up cycle. So we need to be out, not where the growth is, but in those secondary and tertiary markets where Starbucks is already starting to go, where there already talk of it, it's rumored, we're trying to capitalize on that land then, right? The city governments are recognizing the growth is coming. A lot of times the state comprehensive plans dictate. In Washington state, we knew where 20,000 units had to be in the next 5 years, and those city governments had no plans whatsoever. So they need developers like us to come in and say, hey, we've got a solution to your 20,000 unit product. We'll take 10,000 off of those or 2,000 off of those or 500. And now we get to be the one talking to them instead of waiting for them to come find us.
Awesome. So you're looking at the indicators from the private sector, right? Where they've spent millions and millions of dollars and essentially determining where they're going to be, as well as connecting with the government and understanding their needs, putting that together. And that kind of gives you a great idea of where you should be looking for your next plot of land and investing in for that cycle of 5 to 10 years.
Right. Well, and the biggest thing too to remember is ours is only geared towards workforce housing. So if there's no work in the area and it's taking them 2 hours to commute to there because that's where they can afford, well, that's too far. Right? Most workers, an hour max. So we need to be looking at where the work is as well. So if there's a new plant going in and it's going to be done in, say, 3 years, right? Building around those cycles of the work and the employment as well. We literally have some of our markets, they're putting on public television. Builders, please come. We have 2,000 jobs we need to fill, but there's no houses. Please come. Those are good markets to be in.
Absolutely. So help us understand, how do investors participate in these types of projects?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways that investors can participate. A lot of it will depend on their individual risk tolerance. We already talked about if they come in early, they can get an incentive. If they come in later, they don't get that good incentive, but it's still a good return on their investment. So they can come in either through a fund. We do have funds set up, and they can come in through a fund where it's kind of diversified through a couple different phases and products, or they can come directly into an individual product and be an owner of that product. So for instance, our first build to rent that was 100 units, they could be owners of just that 100 unit, or they could come in on our second or third. And our third one, for instance, is 241 units, and they could be an owner of that particular one by coming in and investing directly in that. If it's a fund, for instance, we have some groups that they are a fund manager. They have their own investors and they invest as a fund into ours. And then we also have our own funds where they can come in as an investment in the fund itself, and the fund directly invests. So there's
Gotcha.
multiple ways and multiple opportunities, and a lot of it just depends on rates of return that they want and risk tolerance.
Would you kind of give us some dive deeper into what some of those rates of returns can typically look like or have looked like in the past?
Yeah, so here's a good example. We had a 100K investor on one of our projects that year one of the project, they got 50,000 in depreciation. Okay. So if that was a retirement account, they wouldn't be able to capitalize on that. But this particular person wasn't a retirement account, and that's that bonus depreciation they're able to capitalize on. So did they care that they didn't get a cash flow that year? No, because they got 50K depreciation and they were capitalizing on it. Others who are using in retirement accounts, their IRAs, their 401ks, their HSAs, their Coverdale accounts, different ones like that, they aren't necessarily as concerned about cash flow because they're trying to do a legacy build. So in those situations, they're investing and it's going to sit there, and those that have come in early, some of them are getting an additional 20% bonus on a 6-month term because they took that risk early on. Then there's that 100K. Now it's getting 120,000 that first year, going into now the regular PPM where it's a normal 70-30 split. Those ones they're seeing just under a 2 times multiple. So they're getting about 1.86. So if you were a 100K investor, you're seeing about, 200K returned back to you. You don't have the constant cash flow until later, like years 4 and 5, because you have to wait for the units to get up and rented. But once they're up and rented at that point, then you've got cash flow coming in. The biggest part of it is that at the end, we'll either refinance it and we'll pull out all that equity and get all of your investment back, as well as a good upside. That's where you're seeing, sometimes, 20, 25, 26% return on your money overall. Or you'll turn around and take that and reinvest it into another project. Sometimes some of ours owners choose to 1031 with us. Then they don't have to pay capital gains, and they just keep moving it from project to project, and their legacy growth just keeps going, and they're building their retirement out, and they never have to do any of the work, right? They move it along, they follow the investment, they sign up, they move it along, and it just continues to grow for them.
Yeah, essentially these are all completely passive arrangements.
Correct.
Awesome. We're running low on time, but I wanted to shift gears a bit. Sounds like you've had an incredible career, but when you started in the real estate business, if you could have waved a magic wand and changed one thing, what would that one thing be?
Honestly, don't listen to my friends and family.
And why is that?
Because your friends and family are well-intentioned. They want the best for you. They think I know for a fact, none of them are ill-intentioned, right? They love you, they care for you, they want the best for you, but they have no idea what the best is. They're not you. They don't know even necessarily your hopes and dreams. And oftentimes they don't understand the goals you're working towards. No matter how many ways you explain it, they may never get it until you see success and you're well past it. Then they might finally get a little piece of it. And so oftentimes they are the biggest discouragement. Every time I kept thinking, man, if I just had the support of my friends and family, I never had the support. And if I would have just told myself I don't need their support, it wouldn't have been such a mental drain for me. And because you get that, it's not that they're ill-intentioned, they just don't get it or understand. That's all.
Understood, for sure. That's definitely happened to me before. I remember when I was a young child, bright eyes, and I was telling my dad, hey, I want to be a business guy. And he says, listen, you're going to be a doctor. Okay. And then so go out and be a doctor. That's what we came to this country for. So having to forge that path on the opposite end as a business person definitely was a struggle for him. But after seeing a lot of my success, he's proud that I took my own path. So I definitely get that. And and for sure, and Bethany, is there anything that you want our audience to know about that you're working on that you're super excited about?
Yeah, so I've gone ahead and given you our free ebook, so that's there. So I want to help educate others so they can learn how they can get these great returns without having to do the work, right? They don't have to be on the field like we are. They don't have to be dealing with schedules and contractors and budgets, and they don't have to do any of that, but they can still. I think too many of us think I could never own apartment buildings. I could never own, they only think of one house and I could be a landlord for one house. And how would that make me any money? So for me, education is such a key. So we've got a YouTube channel with 5 years of free education on it. By all means, take advantage of it. Look it up. You'll laugh. There's some old school stuff in there. I've gotten better in some areas. I'm still working on other areas, but it's free. It's a great way for you to kind of dip your toe in the water. And then our ebook helps to kind of get those juices and those thoughts flowing, things that we don't. Just be intentional about learning. When we're intentional about learning, it makes a huge difference. So that's one of the biggest things that I focused on this year, is launching a lot of those educational programs, from business credit and personal credit standpoints to just simple, how do I start an LLC and what does that look like? Business foundations, and launching that one. Simple things that in our mind we've created to be huge, but they really are simple. So for us, being able to share that educational piece, you guys are going to make plenty of mistakes all on your own. Just don't repeat mine, right? Learn from mine, make new ones.
Absolutely. And what I'm sure folks are going to want to connect with you. What are some best ways that folks can reach out to you and connect?
Yeah, so we have our YouTube channel, 5 years of free education on there. You can reach me on LinkedIn. Our company name is American Made Home Solutions, and you can find us, Google us all on the web. We're there. I know that many of you guys are interested in the executive rental space and things like that. So we do a lot of education around that as well as even just setting up, how do I set my business up and what that looks like. So folks reach out to us on that and tend to move their business forward. Sometimes just taking that first step that seems the scariest launches them into a whole different plane. So
awesome. Well, Bethany, you've been super generous about sharing the knowledge that you've had in the BTR space and giving us an insight on a lot of the trials and tribulations that you've gone through and things that you've grown from. So on behalf of the audience, really want to thank you for coming on this podcast. It's been such a pleasure having you here today.
Well, thank you very much, Darren. I appreciate you being here and inviting me. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
We trust that you enjoyed today's show. Visit archcapital.ventures to learn more about how you can leverage real estate investing to improve your life through passive income, financial freedom, and generational wealth.